Jefferson City, Missouri, 1978. In a community known more for its quiet streets and government buildings than for violent crime, a young woman's life was suddenly cut short. Her death would leave family, friends, and neighbors struggling for answers that have never fully come. What happened that night still carries a weight more than 4 decades later. Was it the act of someone she knew and trusted, or was it the random cruelty of a stranger who saw an opportunity? Behind the state capitol's familiar dome and orderly streets, this case reveals a darker story, one that's lingered in the silence for far too long. This is the story of Leigh Ann Wilson. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. In 1978, Missouri's capital was a mid-sized city, home to fewer than 40,000 residents. The state government dominated the economy, with the Capitol building, the governor's mansion, and numerous state offices providing steady employment. Life moved at a slower, steadier pace compared to the larger urban centers of St. Louis or Kansas City. It was a place where many families held on to a sense of safety, where neighbors often knew one another, and violent crime was relatively rare. But Jefferson City was also marked by stark contrasts. Just blocks from the polished marble halls of government stood the imposing Missouri State Penitentiary, an intimidating prison known for its overcrowding and violence. Its looming walls were a stark reminder that Jefferson City was not only a seat of lawmaking, but also a place where lawbreakers were confined. The 1970s were years of transition across Missouri and the nation. The country was reeling from the Vietnam War and Watergate, while local communities dealt with economic strains from inflation and factory slowdowns. Yet in Jefferson City, for many, a sense of security prevailed. That's why this murder struck such a deep chord. It wasn't just the loss of a young woman. It was the shattering of an illusion of safety in Missouri's capital city. Leigh Ann Wilson was 36 years old. She had been divorced only 3 months and had a 9-year-old daughter who lived with her. Her 12-year-old daughter was staying with Leigh Ann's parents at the time. She was a single mother, navigating a new chapter in her life, a familiar experience for many. Her life, much like the city itself, was in a period of change, a quiet backdrop before an unimaginable horror. The evening of Thursday, November 2, 1978, began as an ordinary one for Leigh Ann. At approximately 10:30 p.m., she left her home in Jefferson City to simply buy a pack of cigarettes. A mundane errand, one many of us have done countless times, that would tragically be her last. Her body was discovered the next morning at 7:30 a.m. A farmer, on his way to work, had left his vehicle to tell his dog, who had followed him, to return home when he spotted her. Leigh Ann's body was dumped in a grassy area near a roadside park on South Hardwick Lane, a Highway 63 access road about 7 miles south of Columbia. It was a rural, quiet spot, a stark contrast to the familiar streets of Jefferson City she had left just hours before. That same day, an Ashland mailman found a purse on Old Highway 63 south of Ashland, which provided police with clues to her identity. When Columbia police called Leigh Ann's home to return the purse, they spoke with her 9-year-old daughter, who tragically informed them that her mother had not been seen since the evening before. A child left to explain her mother's sudden, terrifying absence. The initial investigation began quickly, headed by Boone County Sheriff Charlie Foster. A neighbor confirmed seeing Leigh Ann leave home around 10:30 p.m., wearing a pullover sweater, which she was still wearing when her body was found, along with a white button-up sweater. She was driving a 1973 gold and white Plymouth Duster. Near her body, investigators found a pink sweater which did not belong to her. There was also a blood-stained handkerchief that may or may not be linked to her murder. These seemingly small details immediately added a layer of mystery. Whose pink sweater was it, and why was it there? Leigh Ann was found nude except for the sweater, but there was no sign of sexual assault. Her throat had been slashed and she had been stabbed in the back. Police believed she had been dead for 5 or 6 hours when found. Brutality of the attack, coupled with the lack of sexual assault, suggests a deeper personal or rage-fueled motive, rather than a random, opportunistic crime. Initially, police thought she was killed elsewhere and her body dumped at the location. However, this theory almost immediately came into question. There was blood on the gravel road, as well as blood in the grass. This led police to a contradictory belief that she was pushed from the car onto the gravel road, stabbed, and then carried to the grassy area where her body was found. two possible versions of events, with investigators struggling to decide which to believe. This inconsistency, so early in the investigation, already hints at confusion and a struggle to piece together the sequence of events. Leigh Ann was last seen at a Derby gas station in Jefferson City. Her car keys were found in her purse, leading investigators to believe she was not killed in her own car. Police theorized she got into another car, either willingly or by force. After just one day of investigation, police reportedly stopped searching for the rest of her clothing or for the murder weapon, which they believed was a knife. Instead, they focused on finding the killer. This decision to stop searching for crucial evidence like the murder weapon and other clothing so quickly, after just one day, is frankly astonishing. For a case of this magnitude, this feels like a premature ending of critical investigative steps. Why would they halt such a vital search if the crime scene itself presented conflicting theories about where she was actually killed? If the killer brought a weapon, where is it? And if the attack was so violent, where are the rest of her clothes? This immediately raises questions about whether key pieces of evidence were overlooked or simply abandoned too soon. Leigh Ann had several boyfriends, and the police initially focused on finding them, even though police had been told these men were not capable of murder. Her former husband was also questioned but ultimately ruled out as a suspect. Police quickly theorized she was killed by someone she knew. A specific acquaintance of Leigh Ann's became an additional suspect. He reportedly failed 2 polygraph tests, and his car matched the description of an automobile witnesses reported seeing on the access road the night she was killed. However, police could not find any physical evidence linking him to the crime. Other witnesses reported seeing 2 people in a white pickup truck parked on the access road, arguing the night she was killed. Was this connected to Leigh Ann, or an entirely separate incident creating further confusion? Perhaps one of the most significant controversies in this investigation revolved around the Boone County Sheriff's Department. The day after the murder, Boone County Sheriff Charlie Foster reported that he had called in the Mid-Missouri Major Case Squad, known locally as the M Squad, to assist. The M Squad consisted of detectives and law enforcement from within a 50-mile radius of Columbia. However, it was later learned that the case squad had not been called in. This was a monumental misstep, a glaring flaw in the initial response. While the case squad later conceded that the investigation probably wouldn't have been more thorough if they had worked it, they also acknowledged that the composition of the squad would have been different. Specifically, it would have included the City of Columbia Police, the largest city in the area, whose detectives had extensive experience in murder investigations. Leigh Ann lived in and disappeared from Jefferson City in Cole County, but her body was found just outside Columbia city limits in rural Boone County. This territorial overlap, combined with the lack of specialized resources, highlights a significant jurisdictional bungle. It was widely thought that county sheriffs simply did not have the resources or training to handle major crimes, and there was much public criticism about Sheriff Foster and his chief deputy, Bill Whitehead, for not calling in the squad. This controversy led the Sheriff's Department to decline comment on the investigation, and instead issue written press releases where the press was instructed to publish verbatim. This suggests the department struggling under public scrutiny, perhaps trying to control the narrative. This was Sheriff Foster's first murder case, and the inexperience likely compounded the challenges. Leigh Ann's car was finally found Saturday morning, November 5th, in the parking lot of Schulte's IGA grocery store on Missouri Boulevard in Jefferson City. Despite the delay in finding it, there was no evidence of foul play inside the car. This further supports the theory that she left her car and entered another vehicle, either willingly or by force, but still leaves a huge gap in the timeline and the sequence of events. The murder of Leigh Ann Wilson ripped through the quiet fabric of Jefferson City and the surrounding rural communities. For a community accustomed to a time when neighbors truly knew neighbors and doors were often left unlocked, such a brutal crime in their midst was deeply unsettling. The illusion of safety, particularly in a state capital perceived as orderly and stable, was shattered. The news of a young mother, recently divorced and navigating life with 2 daughters, meeting such a violent end resonated deeply. It wasn't just a distant headline. It was a realization that such darkness could intrude upon anyone, even in the most familiar of places. Neighbors who once felt secure in their routines became more guarded, their sense of community weakened by a pervasive unease. Parents looked at their children differently. The world was suddenly a more dangerous place. For Leigh Ann's two daughters, the impact was immeasurable and lifelong. To have their mother disappear in such a terrifying way, only to be found murdered, left an unimaginable void. The 9-year-old, who innocently told police her mother hadn't been seen since the night before, experienced a trauma that no child should have to endure. This crime didn't just end a life. It cast a long, cold shadow over an entire family, forcing them to carry the heavy burden of an unanswered tragedy for decades. The silence around Leigh Ann's case meant that justice was never served, leaving a perpetual wound in the community's collective memory. There's a lot about this case that bothers me. The initial police theory that Leigh Ann was killed elsewhere and dumped was directly contradicted by the presence of blood on both the gravel road and in the grass, suggesting she was attacked at the dump site. Which account is true, and why were investigators unable to reconcile these fundamentally different scenarios? Two entirely different versions of how the crime happened, and neither one firmly established. That kind of uncertainty leaves cracks in the foundation of any investigation. Why did the police stop searching for Leigh Ann's other clothing, and more crucially the murder weapon, just after one day? In a case of this magnitude, it seems like a premature decision. Did they genuinely believe further searching was fruitless, or were resources scarce, leading to a hasty conclusion? The absence of the murder weapon leaves a critical gap in understanding the full scope of the attack. And what about the pink sweater and blood-stained handkerchief? These are tangible, physical clues, the kind of details that can make or break a case. Were they ever identified, or are they still sitting in an evidence room, unanswered questions in fabric form? The fact that the Boone County Sheriff's Department did not call in the Mid-Missouri Major Case Squad is a serious concern. What impact did this lack of experienced, specialized investigators have on the initial processing of the crime scene and the early leads? Could a more robust, multi-agency response have yielded different results, especially given that Columbia Police, with experience in murder investigations, would have been part of it? The sheriff's office was under fire, the public was demanding answers, and yet key resources weren't brought in. That kind of delay can close doors that never reopen. An acquaintance of Leigh Ann failed 2 polygraph tests and owned a car matching witness descriptions. Why was no physical evidence found to connect him to the crime if he was indeed involved? Polygraphs are not admissible in court, but coupled with the matching vehicle, it points to a significant lead that seemingly went cold due to lack of hard evidence. Was the investigation limited in its forensic capabilities, or did the suspects simply manage to avoid leaving any trace? Leigh Ann was found nude except for a sweater, but there was no signs of sexual assault. This is a particularly chilling detail. If the motive wasn't sexual, why was she undressed? Was it an attempt to humiliate, to further degrade her, or perhaps a clumsy effort to mislead investigators? This element strongly suggests a motive rooted in extreme rage or a highly specific personal attack, rather than a random one. Police quickly theorized she was killed by someone she knew. Yet despite interviewing boyfriends and her ex-husband and even a specific acquaintance, a definitive motive was never established. Was it a personal vendetta, a crime of passion gone horribly wrong? Or was the belief that she knew her killer a red herring, and could it have been a random act of violence, especially considering she left home late at night for a common errand? The absence of a clear motive in such a brutal killing remains one of the most perplexing aspects of this case. Sometimes it's not what's found that bothers you, it's what's missing. No weapon, no clear motive, no definite suspect. Just pieces of a puzzle that never quite lock into place. These questions paint a picture of an investigation that, while extensive in some regards, was fraught with inconsistencies and potentially missed opportunities from the very beginning. The community's concern about the Sheriff's Department's capabilities, combined with these investigative inconsistencies, leaves a lingering doubt about whether all avenues were truly explored, or if the initial missteps created an insurmountable barrier to justice. Decades later, the murder of Leigh Ann Wilson remains an open wound in Jefferson City's history. Her story is not just about the crime that ended her life, but about the unanswered questions that have kept her memory alive. Each time her name is spoken, we're reminded of the fragile line between ordinary life and sudden tragedy. Her case still lingers in police files, but more importantly, it lingers in the hearts of those who knew her. For her daughters, the hope for answers and the pain of their loss continues. And as with so many unsolved cases, the silence around Leigh Ann's story is both haunting and telling. Until the truth comes to light, Jefferson City's history will always carry this shadow, proof that even in the most familiar places, darkness can intrude without warning. What do you think happened to Leigh Ann Wilson? Was it a calculated act by someone she knew, or a chance encounter that spiraled into tragedy? The lack of definitive answers leaves us to wonder if the killer has lived a free life, and what echoes of that terrible night still remain. If you have any thoughts or theories about this case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.